Blessings, good evening. We have a few questions to look at tonight. First one up, how to maintain sati whilst working. I find I'm too concentrated on my work and I'm not mindful of anything else that is happening. Thank you. It's a very common question, isn't it? Everyone wants to be able to maintain mindfulness while they're working. And indeed, the Buddha did encourage us to practice, to establish mindfulness in all postures. And that's standing, walking, sitting, lying down, then all the minor, what we call the minor postures, like turning and stretching and chewing and all the kind of other movements of the body and activities of the body. So if you are working, that includes being mindful of your posture as a starting point. But the Buddha encouraged us to practice mindfulness with another quality, sampajanya. So sati, what we translate as mindfulness, means recollection. So keeping something in mind. Sampajanya means all-round awareness, or clear comprehension of a number of different aspects of your moment-to-moment experience. So like say you're working, you know what you're doing, what you're aiming to do with this job or this task. You're aware of things like time and space and whatever is coming up in that activity that may be important. Clear comprehension, you're clearly comprehending what you're aiming to do, whether if you're doing a job of work, what you need to do to stick with it and get it, complete that task, say. Mindfulness is keeping it in mind, but mindfulness also is mindfulness of the path, say. So if you're working at a job, such as typing something on a computer, some task that has to be done on a computer, or you're cleaning a room or something like that, your basic object of mindfulness will be the task, the work that you're doing. But then also there'll be the other factors of the path that may come into your experience. Say you're cleaning a room, you may find a line of ants walking across that room. So even though your mindfulness, you know you are cleaning a room, you are present, you're paying attention, you have an all-round awareness of what the task involves, but then you also have awareness of the 5 precepts, perhaps. And if you encounter ants, you might try to avoid hurting them, so you're contemplating or cultivating kindness and compassion. If you are more experienced in your practice of mindfulness, in meditation, you'll notice that when you're doing a task, a job, it can be driving a car, walking along the road, cleaning a room, typing, whatever the task is. Not only will you be mindful of that task, but you'll be mindful of not only the precepts also, but mindful, say, of a perception such as impermanence may come into your mind as you're doing a job of work. You may be aware that, well, this job of work I'll do for a period of time. Eventually it will be over and I'll change posture, change activity. Or you may reflect, oh, everyone who I'm working with today in this office or this workplace, one day they'll get old and retire, one day they'll die from this job. They won't be here anymore, they won't even be in the world anymore. I will die, they will die. So you can be mindful of impermanence as you work. So even though when you do a job of work, you can use that as a focus for attention, practicing mindfulness, doesn't mean to say you can't be contemplating or cultivating vipassana as you do that job of work. You're also aware of the states of mind that are coming up, whether they're wholesome or not. You're aware of your precepts. There's a whole range of factors of the path that come into play, but you don't have to necessarily be aware of the precepts all the time. It's when the situation requires it, then your awareness of the precepts, remembering the precepts, may come up, depending on the situation. Same with your own internal states of mind. You may be doing a job of work and trying to concentrate on that with mindfulness, doing that job, but as you're doing it, other things come into your experience. You're tired. So if you're tired, maybe you become irritable trying to get the job done quickly, say. So then your mindfulness is not only turned to the job you're doing, the task, but also you're aware, at the moment physically I'm tired. More negative, irritable mind states are coming up. Don't feel very good in my body, in myself perhaps. So you start also becoming aware of that and how that's affecting you. And then that may lead on to some insight, applying of wisdom, applying of insight. I'm tired. I need to change my approach now, or I need to go and rest, or I need to carry on but be very careful because I'm tired. For example, we can generalize about, be mindful while you work, but you'll see through practice that different factors come up. And you can't always predict what's going to come up, what obstacles will be there, how you'll feel, what's coming up in your mind. But the important thing is to keep coming back to developing presence of mind, mindfulness. And you can use a job of work for that. And that becomes your object, just as when you're doing formal meditation, you can meditate on the breath, say that's your object, that you're developing mindfulness or being mindful of. Or when you're working, you can be mindful of driving, of typing, of cleaning, of doing this or doing that. In the same way. And just as when you're doing formal meditation, sitting, walking meditation, you have to cope or adapt or manage different moods, mental states, different feelings that arise as you're doing your meditation. Same when you're doing your job of work. So particularly regular practice will help you to get used to it and how to practice in different situations. And you may find your work becomes more enjoyable. Even a very repetitive, boring job can become quite pleasant when you use it as a basis for developing mindfulness in daily life. There's a lot we could talk about here, but try to make everything you do as part of your Dhamma practice. In cultivating mindfulness, keeping precepts, developing insight, wisdom, is all part of that. It could be bringing up the reflection when you're working, am I suffering here? What is the suffering here? Is the suffering in my mind, or is it the task I'm doing? There's so many opportunities to contemplate doing a job of work that can become quite enjoyable. It can become a basis for learning and finding out about yourself if you develop the right attitude, and if you maintain mindfulness, that will help. Dear Luang Por, thank you for the teachings. You have mentioned that if one contemplated deep enough, he or she will realize that the mind has nothing permanent to hold on to, which could be quite scary. Can we view this finding with metta so that we won't fall into depression? Thank you. We can go that way if you're contemplating the impermanence of your own body, mind, people you love and know, the world around you, the things you own. It can be scary because you realize nothing belongs to you, nothing will last. But that's only one possibility or one outcome. It could also be a great source of freedom and happiness. Like one way the Buddha described human beings, we're bound to the world, we're bound to the cycle of birth and death by craving, attachment, and he talked about craving and attachment in terms of being fetters, the 10 sangyojanas or fetters that bind our mind to the world, to worldly existence and to birth and death. And so the practice of Dhamma is a practice of developing sila, samadhi, panya, calm and insight to unbind the mind from all these fetters. And the first stage of enlightenment, the stream enterer, abandons the first 3 fetters. Sakkaya ditthi, self-view, silapata paramasa, attachment to external practices and rituals, and then skeptical doubt. These are 3 fetters that one abandons in the beginning of the path of practice towards ultimate enlightenment. So seeing impermanence can help you with that, really. You're seeing through the impermanence of self-view, attachment to the view that this body is me, mine, myself, a person, a being. Through developing insight into the 32 parts, the 4 elements, seeing them as impermanent, as not self. What we traditionally call vipassana insight. Same with the attachment, the blind or the attachment to various views that underlie what we call silapata paramasa, just assuming a certain practice will lead you to nibbana, but practice without insight, without understanding, and that's impossible. But unbinding is seeing through that attachment with clarity, seeing the path, what is the path, what is not the path, removes doubt. As we practice, we're removing these fetters, and so the mind becomes lighter. The fetters are, chains, ropes. That's what a fetter is. It's something that ties you down, binds you, ties you up, binds you up. If you're unbinding, untying, unfettering, then that implies a lightness, a freedom of mind. So seeing impermanence in the body, seeing impermanence in feelings, in thoughts, in your views, in your beliefs, in your disbeliefs, seeing the impermanence of that and therefore loosening some of the blind attachment to these things lightens the mind up. So impermanence, seeing impermanence can be liberating. Just as much as it can be scary, it can be liberating. So, sometimes you have to trust in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. Sometimes you have to sometimes you have to proceed with caution, but if you're developing the whole path, sila, samadhi, panya, in the correct way, you're developing correct view, reflecting on unwholesome, negative states of mind, with understanding that they are the cause of suffering if you cling to them, and cultivating wholesome states of mind that are for your benefit and the benefit of others. If you understand that more and more, you get a sense of well-being that helps support the insight into impermanence. And when you see, oh, this body that I've been clinging to as self is actually not self, or you see your thoughts, your highest ideals and beliefs are actually still just beliefs and ideals, they're not a self. The sense of well-being you've also been cultivating in your practice supports the insight into impermanence and ultimately into not self. So you can experience not self, you can experience what we say emptiness of self in your body and mind. You can see that, know that, without it being depressing. It's actually liberating, freeing, frees you up from this, all this clinging, all this binding. It's a process of unbinding, and that's happiness. You have to try it, you have to taste it to see, to know. The Buddha said it will be for your benefit, the benefit of others, it will be for your happiness, this unbinding, this letting go. But you have to taste it for yourself, then you'll understand. And there's no taste as delicious as the taste of Dhamma. And the Dhamma is for unbinding, letting go, and seeing the truth, seeing impermanence. The impermanent nature of physical, mental phenomena. If it is scary, maybe it's just the unfamiliarity with this, seeing the true nature of things. At first you're unfamiliar. It's unfamiliar territory, and so when you go somewhere new, strange, or you experience something new, strange, sometimes that can be, you could make you uncomfortable, or you're not sure where you're going, what's happening, because it's new. But if you keep practicing, you don't stick with that feeling of awkwardness or discomfort. You get to know what you're doing and why, and you do feel comfortable with the Dhamma, say, with letting go of attachment, comfortable with the perception of impermanence, and then it's not scary, it's just the way things are. If you are experiencing depression from meditation in this way, it's probably a sign you're imbalanced in the way you're looking at things. It's very common, isn't it, to feel disappointment where you notice something that you previously thought would bring you lasting happiness, something was good, pleasurable, going to make you happy, then you realize, oh, it's impermanent. It may still bring you pleasure, but it's impermanent, it doesn't last. That can be very disappointing. So you can say, well, I've seen the impermanence of this body and all the pleasures I have with this body, all the things I like, the pleasures of having a human body, doing things with it, obviously sexual pleasure, eating, seeing, tasting, touching, smelling. When you see impermanence, at first it's very disappointing. You feel let down. Oh, none of this pleasure is lasting or perfect. None of it's perfect. That can be quite disappointing, so it leads to maybe depression or annoyance. But that's because the mind is still not adjusted to the truth. It's not yet accepting the truth. It's simply annoyed that something that you thought would be satisfying isn't. So you go into another reaction, reaction of aversion. But over time you may come to appreciate the higher wisdom of seeing impermanence. Ajahn Chah used to say that when you see the impermanence of the body, it's like waking up to the magician's illusion or to the confidence trickster's trick. You realize what they've been doing. This body that you've been praising and indulging and looking after and expecting all this happiness to come from it for so many years, after repeated observation and investigation, you realize, this human body is only destined to get old, get sick and die. It's pretty hopeless. Once you get over the initial disappointment, you realize, that's the way it is, I'll let it go. And then your mind goes peaceful. when you really see it and accept it. But at first you might feel depressed. Even, say you experience the bliss of samadhi, you meditate and you attain jhana or samadhi, but then samadhi, the bliss of samadhi doesn't last, doesn't it? Because bliss of samadhi is usually associated partly with the physical body, and it's not sustainable. Even the bliss of samadhi is not sustainable. It fades, comes and goes. So even attaining a very wholesome, skillful state of mind, such as samadhi, even jhana, can still lead to disappointment when it fades. But then you realize, well, that's the nature even of this very refined mental state. It's still a sankhara, it's a condition that doesn't last. Doesn't mean to say it's wrong because it doesn't last, but it's just knowing that it doesn't last helps free you from this disappointment when it fades. You know, oh, that's the way it is. This is why we have to maintain mindfulness with all the things we develop in the practice, both the good and the bad, the superior states, the bliss, as well as the more coarser states of suffering. We maintain mindfulness and reflect, oh, they're impermanent. When you see impermanence, your mind doesn't, when you truly see it, your mind doesn't become depressed. It just knows this is the way things are. It's peaceful. Another question, what qualities do you need to develop to be a good monastic? In the first instance, I guess you've got to be sincere in your aspiration to practice as a Buddhist monastic, a monk or nun, bhikkhu, bhikkhuni, novice. You've got to be sincere, meaning you have some faith and you give value to the training. When you have this sincerity and the respect for the training, faith in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, you see it as a good thing. This will draw out your effort. And number one, you've got to study the rules, because there are rules that we have to keep. We have the Patimokkha, say for monks, we have the Patimokkha training, 227 rules, which we all have to keep. And we're constantly reviewing them, and if we do unwittingly, unmindfully break a rule, then we have to re-establish the commitment to keep that rule once we realize. And we regularly talk to another monk about offences. If we've broken a rule, we reveal that to another monk and then re-establish the commitment to keep. Same for lay people, keeping 5-8 precepts. You have to keep re-establishing your commitment to the precepts. For a monastic, it's essential because you're receiving alms. You're receiving food and the 4 requisites from lay people who are kindly, out of generosity and faith, supporting us. So we actually have an obligation to keep the rules of the Vinaya, the training that the Buddha gave. That way you can rest easy, even if you feel you're a monk or a nun with a mind full of defilements. You feel like your mind is really not peaceful, you can't meditate, you've got all kinds of crazy thoughts coming up, you're not very good, don't have any great skills, you can't chant very well, you can't wear your robes very well, you can't do this, can't do that. That doesn't matter as long as you've got the sincerity of commitment to keep the rules of training the best you can, to the best of your ability. Then you're meeting that obligation to the laity who are supporting you for that. So being a good monk doesn't yet necessarily mean you have great skill with samadhi or deep insight or you're enlightened. That would be a good bonus if you could. But just being a monk or a nun who keeps the rules is your first requirement, isn't it? You're willing to keep the rules. And then you work from there, and actually keeping the rules and then putting effort into training your mind, developing mindfulness, insight, reflecting on the Dhamma, learning the Dhamma, reflecting on it, will lead on to many good things. And how well your practice goes, how quick, how slow your progress is, well, that will vary from person to person because our karma, our character is different. But you have the minimum requirements of keeping the rules. If you can develop some compassion, that would be good. Compassion for yourself, compassion for your fellow monastics, compassion for the laity who support you, that would be great. Everyone likes someone who has some metta, some karuna. Everyone finds it hard to be with a grumpy monastic. Sure, all monastics may have their moments when they're grumpy, but generally speaking, try not to harbour a lot of grumpiness, anger, because you're receiving alms and support from others. You're dependent on others, so it's appropriate to be a little bit humble, compassionate, patient with your own moods and states of mind, patient with other people. In Thailand, being a Buddhist country, they often have a kind of general perception of how a monastic should be. And the bottom line is, well, you've got to be, I don't know what the word, how you would describe it, reasonably kind. You've got to be reasonably humble. You've got to be appreciative of the fact that you're being supported by the lay community. You can't be too, you can't take the lay people's support for granted. If a monk shows that, then everyone feels it's not right, because it's generally in the society a monk has to be humble, take that responsibility seriously that they're receiving alms. So if a monk doesn't keep the rules or is too arrogant or too taking people for granted, that is quickly identified. Another quality is the kindness, compassion. If a monk or a nun is too self-centered, arrogant, angry, aggressive, it's out of place. So in a Buddhist country, that's quickly identified. So, just for example, I remember once in Thailand, many years ago, I was there, living there. There was a story. A monastery was having a problem with stray dogs. Actually, many monasteries have this problem in Thailand. People love to dump stray dogs and cats in the monasteries, or they just turn up anyway. So monks generally are dealing with this problem, feeding them, sorting them out the best they can, tolerating them the best they can. But there was one monk who got really angry with all the stray dogs in his monastery. He wasn't the senior monk, the teacher, he was just a member of the community. And there was one day he got really angry with a mother dog and started hitting the dog very violently. But somebody filmed it, a passerby filmed it, and it went on the national news, and there was outrage because everyone said, this is such an ugly picture for a monk to be hitting an animal in that way, being cruel to an animal. Of course, anyone, whether you're a monk or not, shouldn't be cruel to animals, but particularly for a monk who's supposed to be keeping precepts, receiving the alms of laity, supported by the laity, to do that was seen as gross. So there was a national outcry, and the monk had to apologise, obviously, and he received some reprimands. In the end, I'm not sure what happened to him, but generally there was an outcry against the behaviour of this monk. There's that kind of thing. Monk, however bad it gets, however difficult it gets for you, you have to be appreciative of your rules and sensitive to the support of the laity. then things tend to go well. If you maintain those qualities, you maintain what we say, your hiri otapa, your shame, fear of wrongdoing. That will generally keep you practicing in the right way in different situations, which are often unpredictable. And of course, out of that, out of the good practice, then amazing things can happen. So sometimes you hear the other side of the story, not just monks who are being cruel or behaving inappropriately. You hear about the good ones, the ones who are threatened, physically threatened, but they maintain their calm, their patience, or even physically harmed, but they maintain their calm. And that's always inspiring when a monk maybe has been physically attacked for some reason. Maybe somebody doesn't like monks, or they're trying to steal something from the temple, and a monk comes across the thief, and the thief beats the monk up. So many different situations it could happen. But when a monk maintains their precepts, they're not aggressive themselves, and they also are showing forgiveness sometimes. You get that. You get a monk who has been attacked by someone, then the police find the culprit, bring the culprit and the monk together, and the monk forgives the person who attacked them. That's always very inspiring. And people say, oh, that's a true monk, because they have forgiveness. Not an easy thing to do, but when the monk shows kindness, compassion, gratitude, all these kind of qualities, as well as mindfulness and wisdom, of course, then people appreciate that. That's the upside of the monastic community. And actually, some of these qualities, you don't have to be some great enlightened teacher to show qualities such as compassion, patience, tolerance, mindfulness. You can see it in the humblest little junior novice monk who's just young, new to the training. They can still display great qualities of patience. I've known novice monks who are like 16 years old, just boys, but they're a novice monk, and they've got seriously ill, and displayed great courage in facing their illness, not complaining, being patient with the pain, the difficulty. Putting up with difficult conditions, like again, when I was a young monk, some of the novice monks in northeast Thailand, they'd sit at the end of the line of monks in a monastery and get very little food. You get plenty of rice, but very little proper food in a day sometimes. But never complaining, just putting up with it and being very patient with the conditions. And when you see that, you realise, oh, this is not a small thing for a 16-year-old to eat very simply, have no money, have no means to get any better food than they get offered or shared out to them, without complaining, without getting upset, and maybe putting up with that kind of thing for a long time because they're in a very poor area with no choice in the matter. It's very inspiring to see. So patience is another quality, makes a good monastic. Dear Luang Por, I need your help. I lose my temper easily. I've been trying to control this for a long time, but without much success. Could you please guide me? How can I have better control over my anger so that I can maintain mindful speech? Maybe there's two aspects to this. One is preventative, one is how to deal with it when it arises. And the other side is the prevention. So prevention is, one thing the Buddha encouraged us to do daily is cultivate the quality of metta, goodwill, kindness, every day. In meditation, in attitude, in the way you think, in the way you speak, the way you act, consciously cultivate goodwill, kindness, generosity. So that's prevention. The Buddha praised, say, a monk who thinks of his fellow monks with kindness. So the same for lay people. If you think of your fellow lay people with kindness, you're following the Buddha's teaching. Sometimes that will be easy, sometimes it'll be very difficult because maybe someone annoys you or you don't like them. But work at it until you can do it. Set it as your own challenge, personal challenge, to cultivate metta every day for everyone you encounter. Even people you meet or hear about that you feel are badly behaved, terrible people. Cultivate metta, they're still people. We always have something in common, even with the worst person in the world. You've got something in common with them. You're still a human being, subject to birth, aging, sickness and death, in the round of samsara, still the owner of karma. So if someone behaves badly, you may bring up anger, but reflect, they're going to have to receive the fruits of their karma. You actually can feel compassion for them because they're going to have pain for whatever they've done. So cultivate metta on a daily basis until it's normal for you to cultivate metta, to have metta in your mind. You might say until it's the default mode of your mind. Even with metta, goodwill, kindness, there'll be certain situations, certain people, certain situations where we're pressured for a number of reasons. It could be someone is very aggressive or bullying or selfish and it affects us. Could be something goes wrong and we're very disappointed. Could be that we're very tired or ill and so it's hard to maintain goodwill and we lose our temper. So in those situations, have a few plans. What am I going to do when I lose my temper? So I usually recommend use the breathing meditation. Go to the breath. When you catch yourself losing your temper, take a few deep breaths, re-establish mindfulness. If you need to, you walk away from the situation, compose yourself with breathing. Deep breathing if it helps. For a long time if it's needed, if it helps. Have something in your mind that you know, when I'm getting angry, that's what I'm going to do. If you're going to focus in on anger itself, well, how does anger arise? Well, you have to have a trigger. So you see something, you hear something, you remember something. You get anger arising as a feeling first, and usually if you're sharp enough, you might notice the feeling maybe in your chest. Discomfort, tension. Even very subtle anger, there's still a bit of tension there. Otherwise it wouldn't be anger, because anger is accompanied by unpleasant feeling. The more you meditate on feeling, practice mindfulness of feeling, the more you'll notice that when your feeling changes, when the stimulation, some kind of sense contact, stimulation brings that feeling with it. Notice it. This is the trigger for anger. If you keep thinking about that thing or reacting in that same way, the feeling will continue and maybe intensify. The trains of negative thought will multiply, get faster, get more serious. What we call giving importance to the object of your anger will take place if you're not very aware. What we call wrong attention, ayoniso manasikara. You give wrong attention to the thing that makes you angry, so you keep developing anger in that situation. So it could be as simple as you're getting angry because you see someone you don't like walking towards you, or look away. And that could calm you down. You learn to not dwell or focus on the thing that makes you angry. If it's a thought, turn away from that thought. Turn to something better. If it's something outside of you, will move away, turn your head away. If you're in a conversation where you're getting angry, stop talking maybe, or stop talking in that way. Again, you might need to physically move away, or at least shut up, or at least just change the direction of your speech, and then the anger will subside. So don't give wrong attention to an object that brings anger or sustains anger. Be aware of the unpleasant feeling, and as you practice more, you'll say, I don't want this unpleasant feeling, I don't want this suffering. So you'll be more motivated to let go of the anger quickly, let go of the negative thoughts quickly, be more patient, more restrained in that situation. So it's a whole practice, isn't it? The prevention of anger and then what to do with it when it arises. And we have our precepts, so be careful what you say, reflect on your speech, avoid saying things in anger, speaking in anger, and try to be more mindful of speech, more mindful of actions. Don't break things, don't throw things around. You may have the thought, I want to break something, I want to throw things around, I want to shout and scream, but don't indulge the thought, don't indulge the intention. Just let it arise and pass away. That's your aim. So keep working on it. We're all working on it. We call it a work in progress. I always remember the cook who came and stayed here, and he said, oh, my job is so difficult, there's so much pressure from each side, from myself, because I want to be a good chef, from my staff, who sometimes don't cooperate or make mistakes, or they're late, or whatever, from the customers, who have all their opinions and views, and some complain, and some praise, and some want attention, and then all the different obstacles of running a big commercial kitchen. He said, oh, this job is just so much pressure. I see so many defilements arising all the time, my conceit, my anger. He said, and I said, well, that sounds like it's food for practice. He said, yep, I'm going to get enlightened before anyone else. There's so much pressure here. So don't just, feel bad because you've got a lot of anger coming up. Use your anger as a teacher. Maybe if you're the one who has lots of anger, maybe you'll become enlightened before any of us. Remember Lumpur Khao, the great arahant, who the reason he became a monk is because he's so angry. He's angry with his wife, who he found in bed with another man. And his first response was he's going to chop their heads off with a machete out of anger. But then he considered, why make so much bad karma chopping them up with this machete, and no doubt having to be reborn in hell for many lifetimes or whatever. Why make all that bad karma because of their fault, their problem? They're not faithful, they're not honest. I'm going to do something better. So he flung his machete down rather than following his anger. He flung it down and he went off and became a monk, and then he became enlightened. So they say sometimes the angry person becomes enlightened before anyone else, because the anger, they turn the energy into energy for the practice, cultivating mindfulness, effort in the meditation. So maybe that's a good lesson. See how you can redirect your angry energy. Namo Buddhaya. Lumpur, could you please explain about Mara? Is Mara like the devil in other beliefs? Well, it's not going to be exactly the same, because other teachings, other beliefs are not the same, are they? So I'm not sure exactly how Christianity or Hinduism, Islam describes the devil or similar figures, but in Buddhism, there's actually different kinds of Mara. The Buddha was always very thorough, very detailed in his explanation. So there's Mara, who is the personification of attachment, you might say, Deva Bhuta Mara, so the being who is considered to be the Lord of the highest heaven realm, because Mara is actually a figure with a lot of parami, a lot of good qualities, but still likes to have attachment to control of the pleasures of the senses, and the creativity of the mind. And has a sort of invested attachment in not letting anyone else escape the attachment to the sensual realm. So Mara eventually will come along and try and prevent somebody from becoming enlightened. Mara likes to keep everyone within the sensual realm under his control, or her control. So there is the Devabhuta Mara, but then there's also Kilesa Mara. Kilesas are Mara: greed, anger, delusion, selfishness, jealousy, fear. They're all Mara, they're all obstacles. So you could translate Mara as obstacles to the practice, to doing good, to liberation, to Nibbana. So Kilesas are number one obstacles. Sankhara Mara. Sankhara means all conditions, physical conditions, body and physical things, mental conditions, thoughts, intentions. They're all Mara as well if you attach to them. If you believe in them and attach to them, give too much importance to them. Because they're conditions, they change on you. You're just enjoying your nice blissful samadhi and then it fades. And that's Mara. If it causes you annoyance, oh, I lost my nice samadhi state. That's Mara, isn't it? Mara is always that thought coming in, to give up. Mara loves to get us to give up. So in that case, Sankhara Mara made the blissful feeling you experience leads you to then go, oh, I give up, I can't be bothered, nothing lasts, everything's impermanent, like when the person was saying they get depressed. That's Mara. Or you do some good, but then straight away something bad happens. It's quite common, isn't it? Mara slips in, because Sankhara Mara, your Sankharas are always changing. Things change on you, so you're just developing a very good state of mind. You put effort into developing mindfulness, maybe a thought of generosity or loving kindness, and then it changes on you. Sankharas fade away and a new Sankhara comes up and you have a thought of anger. Slips into your mind. It's like, you're just trying to be kind and then now I'm getting angry. The changing nature of sankharas is an obstacle, it's something you have to deal with, and ultimately you don't live forever, do you? You lose the chance to practice when you get old, sick and die. That's sankhara mara. So there are different kinds of mara in Buddhism. Some are just the internal mental states, some are just the changing nature of phenomena and the impermanence of life itself. And then there's the actual Devabhuta Mara, the person, the being. A lot of questions. Hello Ajahn, I started meditation again. I can concentrate very well for 45 minutes, but then I started to cry with tears, and I don't know why. I don't have any reason to be sad, so I'm not sure why I had so many tears. Afterwards, I had the feeling of being scared, and then I had the feeling of being happy. I was watching the space between these mental states, and I could sit there observing for a long time, many thoughts coming and going, but I felt very weightless. Please advise. Sounds like there's a lot going on. Very common for meditators, especially in the early days of our meditation, to experience tears as you calm down physically and mentally. The mind is relaxing, various suppressed sufferings, memories will be coming up, and sometimes they produce tears. It's a kind of release. Excuse me. It's a kind of release, which is probably a good thing. And you'll probably find it won't continue every time you meditate. It's just sometimes there is this release going on, release of tension, suffering, letting go. So be patient with it and observe, and you may find that the tears don't repeat themselves every time. There may be a specific thing that you've been clinging to that you're now letting go, or it may be more just generally calming down of body and mind. Tears are actually part of the experience of rapture, which is a wholesome state of mind. Some people get tears Some people get tears every time they meditate. Some people just occasionally. Piti and rapture, this aspect of samadhi, of the peaceful mind, is a little bit uncertain. It's still sankhara, it's still conditions of mind that change. Sometimes piti is very strong, sometimes very brief, sometimes is there for a long time. Sometimes it's very fleeting, very minor. So there's a certain uncertainty to it. But it's just one of the aspects of the mind calming down. We feel light in body, like you described, feel weightless, have tears. These are all signs that the mind is letting go of various coarser attachments, now focusing in a more wholesome way, maybe on an object such as the breath, coming closer to the Dhamma. Maybe there's faith, there's energy, there's other good qualities present in the mind. So piti, rapture arises. So it's like a signpost telling you you're probably doing things correctly, but keep learning from your experience, keep observing, and try not to cling to it, but just observe. Oh, it's like this. Today I had tears. Today I felt weightless. It was like this. Maybe learn what was working in your meditation. What did you do that led up to that? But try not to cling on to these different symptoms of samadhi, because when they change, you may get disappointed. Dear Lumpur, I hope you are in good health, and I wish a warmer winter for you and the noble Sangha. After sincerely trying to improve my speech and keeping the fourth precept in a faithful way, I have come to the realization that my problem in relation with this aspect of sila is much deeper than I initially realized. Seeing that is really the absence of continuous mindfulness and lack of wisdom that prevents me from achieving this goal. Sometimes I wonder if this is unskillful habit, perhaps has been carried for many, many lives. I need your guidance once more. Now I meditate with the goal of cultivating mindfulness and being aware every minute in my daily life. But when mindfulness slips, the kilesa take over and I incur and I start to break the fourth precept. Keeping the precepts is my goal. Please advise. Practice makes perfect. So yes, the 5 precepts are essential foundation of our practice, and they have to be developed, cultivated through resolution, determination, and then reviewing, because you have to review where you lost them. So with speech, a really good practice, I say, is every day, maybe at the end of your day, review everything you spoke about during the day. So every conversation you've held since you woke up in the morning till when you go to bed at night. Get the context, who did you speak to, what was the context, what did you say, as much as you can. And get in the habit of doing that, reviewing your speech patterns and conversations through every day. Every day do that. And you'll become much more mindful. And as you're speaking to people, you'll be aware, well, later on I'm going to be reviewing this, and so is there anything I shouldn't be saying that I'm saying now? And that's one part of the practice, reviewing your precepts. Another is the feeling of regret that comes up when you break a precept and when you act unskillfully, you speak with negativity or rude or aggressive to someone, whatever, or you tell a lie. The regret, when you realize what you've done with full mindfulness, you'll feel some unease, some regret. That's suffering, and you don't want that suffering, so then you're motivated to try not to repeat the same mistake, the same error again. And little by little, we say your hiriotapa, your sense of shame, fear of wrongdoing and fear of the consequences of breaking precepts will become clearer to the point where it's there in your mind guiding you in different situations. So you become aware, I'm about to break a precept in your speech, so before you break the precept, you stop yourself. This awareness and understanding will improve to that point. In the beginning, you only know after the event. It's too late, and you feel annoyed with yourself. But over time, you start to notice during and even before you break a precept, you're aware, I might break a precept here. And you develop some skillful means to stop yourself, to prevent yourself, how to apply your brakes, your mental brakes in a situation, how to avoid such situations in the first place. You literally avoid them. If you know you're going to break a precept, don't go there, don't say that, and don't do that if you can. So you get to know the triggers, you get to know how to prevent unskillful states of mind taking over and then leading you to break the precepts before you've even broken them. So the Buddha encourages us to reflect like this, before, during, after, over and over again until we become really used to doing that. What am I going to say here? It's not necessarily you're thinking it through, but you're just aware, what am I saying, what's going on here with mindfulness? As you're speaking, do I need to be careful? Am I losing it? Am I speaking an untruth? Am I speaking in an unskillful way as you're speaking? And then afterwards. So quite often it is afterwards, only afterwards, that we realize. But nevertheless, we keep practicing until even before we indulge in the unskillful speech, we are aware. Then we don't do it, don't say it. And you just keep practicing like that. So you can make the 5 precepts the basis of your mindfulness practice in daily life. Especially if you're in a situation where you're talking a lot at work or in social situations. And nowadays that includes, phones and technology, because we can also press the send button too quickly with a nasty text or an untrue comment or something. So you keep reviewing, keep establishing mindfulness until you learn how to contemplate before you even say or do something. That's your goal. And if you meditate regularly, you also become aware of the sankharas, the mental formations that lead you to speak. You're meditating and you've got something in your mind that you haven't let go of, so you're already having the argument in your mind, or you're insulting the person in your mind, or you're saying something unskillful or doing something unskillful in your mind. You see it first as you meditate more. Maybe you can remedy it in your meditation through training yourself to abandon unskillful intentions as they're coming up mentally before they have come out in your actions. And if you really do it a lot, this will even happen in your sleep, in your dreams. So somebody was telling me about their dream where they were going to have an argument with someone, or they were having an argument with someone else, and then they stopped in the dream. They said, I shouldn't be speaking like this. It's inappropriate. That's a really good sign. It means your practice of the precepts has gone right into your consciousness, so even in your dreams, you're keeping the precepts. Similarly, if they're not established, well, they'll come out in your dreams, and you're saying and doing unskillful things in your dreams, and that's a sign, I better be careful. I've got to work harder on improving my practice of the precepts. So that's the end of the Q&A session today. So we wish you all well with your practice.